Hello and welcome to Learning with Law. Today's video is going to be about the difference between teaching on Long Island, New York and teaching in Orlando, Florida. Which is better, teaching in New York or teaching in Florida? I want to give a huge thank you to all of my subscribers, and if you have yet to subscribe, please make sure you do that before the end of this video so you are the first to know about all of my new videos. Thank you so much. Hello everyone, welcome to my channel Learning with Law. My name is Lauren for those that don't know who I am, and today I'm going to be talking about something that has changed in my life recently. I've been teaching on Long Island, New York for 10 years now, and last August I made the move down to Orlando, Florida. So I am currently teaching here, and I just wanted to talk about the differences between teaching in New York and teaching in Florida. Now, granted, my experience is going to be different from a lot of people's, but I just wanted to give you an inside look into my personal experience. So I've taught on Long Island for 10 years, as I've said, in 3 different districts. So I have different experiences from each of those districts. I also taught different grades, and both in the high school and the middle school. But I am certified to teach English and special education 7 through 12. So I will talk about my experiences on Long Island, and then I will talk about my experiences here in Orlando, Florida. Okay, so I'm going to walk you through both Florida and New York State teaching requirements, school duration, school hours, how many prep periods you have, how many classes you will teach, the building layout, collaboration amongst your peers, the curriculum, job security, tenure, and of course, salary. Okay, so I graduated from St. Joseph's College we're going way back now, 2009. So things have changed a little bit as far as New York State teaching requirements. But when I graduated from college, I had my 4-year bachelor's degree, and I was certified to teach English 7 through 12. And then I needed to take 3 different state exams in order to get my license, in addition to obviously doing a half year of student teaching. Half year? Yeah, a semester of student teaching. So I did half of my student teaching in a middle school and the other half in a high school. So I had both experience there. So once I passed my exams, I was able to then get my certifications. I did go on to get my master's degree in students with disabilities, 7 through 12. So I was able to teach both special education and general education. And I was teaching there for 5 years on the special ed concentration. I received my master's in 2012, I believe it was. And from there, that definitely opened some more doors for me. So I was able to get a position in teaching special ed. And in Florida, the process was a little bit different. So I did do some digging, and I looked at the Florida Department of Education website, and I found some information. So even when I was making the transition from New York to Florida, I was wondering, what am I supposed to do? How will I transfer my certification? But through that website, I was able to find out that since I was a certified teacher in New York and I had my professional certificate, not my initial, I was able to transfer my teaching degree from New York to Florida by just paying a small fee. I think it was around $100. So I didn't have to take any tests in Florida. I'm not sure if that's something that I'm going to have to do in the future, but for now I was able to get my certificate and just start teaching. So yeah, they like to see New York teachers basically anywhere in the country because to get your degree to teach in New York is rather difficult. They actually just changed the requirements, and now they're using EdTPA, which I don't know that much about. My brother just got certified through EdTPA, and I heard it was a huge, a huge undertaking, and they had to do a lot more work with EdTPA than I had to do with my initial certificate. I did look at Florida's website to see exactly what the requirements are for teaching in Florida. Florida, and it's a little bit different than New York. So there are many different pathways to get your certification in Florida. So if you are someone that is just starting out in Florida, I suggest you go over to that website to make sure that you're fulfilling all those requirements. And again, that's the Florida Department of Education website, the Florida DOE, and I believe it's .org. So that is fldoe.org. So you can find out all the information there. There are definitely different pathways that you can take in order to get your certification. But again, for me, it was something that was just as simple as paying a fee, uploading my files to show that I have my certification in New York, and making a phone call to make sure that all of my paperwork was transferred over. So for me, it was a little bit easier, and you just have to make sure that you're checking from your state to make sure that you're fulfilling all of those requirements. Okay, so let's talk about the school duration time. How long will you be in school whether you're in New York or in Florida? I did some research and I found out that the minimum days required for both states are 180 days. So you're not going to escape that. You're going to be getting 180 days wherever you are. But the time periods that you were in school, that definitely changes. So if you are teaching in New York, or if you live in New York and you have kids that go to school in New York, generally you are going to start going to school the first week in September. That's when teachers are going back to their classrooms, and students are generally starting the first week in September. Florida, on the other hand, we start a little bit earlier. Yay. We go back to school the beginning of August. So the county that I'm teaching in Florida, we actually go back the first week in August, and we have 5 days to plan and prepare our classrooms. Generally, the students will come into school that following week, so that is starting in August. If you're teaching in New York, your Christmas or winter break is going to change year to year. In Florida, we have 2 weeks off for Christmas break every single year. So I think that's a plus. I mean, in New York, when I was teaching, sometimes I'd only get off 1 week. In Florida, I will be taking off for 2 weeks. In Florida, Thanksgiving break is the entire week. In New York, sometimes we just get 2 or 3 days off, depending on when Thanksgiving will fall. When you are teaching in Florida, spring break actually occurs in March, and that is 1 week long. Depending, in New York, sometimes spring break will fall in March, and other times it will fall in April. Sometimes it'll be half in March and half in April. It just depends on when it lands. And unfortunately for Florida, we do not get a midwinter recess. So normally that happens in February. We do not get that in Florida. Maybe that's why we have 2 weeks during Christmas, and our schedules are a little bit different, but we still are getting those 2 weeks somewhere during our time in school. If you are teaching or have students that live in New York, your school year will end in June. In Florida, this is a perk that we have. We end a little bit earlier. Our school year ends at the end of May, generally around my birthday, which is the 27th, and we have 2 post-planning days that we get to straighten up our classrooms and kind of finalize everything for the end of the year. So let's talk about school hours. Now, any school that you teach at, the hours are going to fluctuate. Whether you're in an elementary school, a middle school, or a high school, your hours are just going to be different. But there's something very different about Florida that I want to talk about. But first, I'll talk about my last school that I was teaching in on Long Island. That school actually started at 7 a.m. and ended at 1:52 p.m. We had 9 periods in a day that lasted for 42 minutes each. We had 4 minutes of passing time. Now, this is not across the board Long Island schools. There are some schools that do block scheduling. Their classes are a little bit longer and they rotate day to day. They might not have 9 periods in a day if they're doing block scheduling. When I got to Florida, there was a little bit of an adjustment period for me because we actually teach for 50 minutes instead of 42. And you would think like, oh, that extra 8 minutes, it doesn't really matter, but it adds up, especially when you're used to, for 10 years, teaching 42 minutes. So it was a little bit of an adjustment period for me, but only have 7 periods in a day. Another major adjustment for me was teaching on Long Island. Yes, we had 9 periods in a day. I was only required to teach 5 of those periods. So if you do some simple math, yes, that means that I was off for 4 periods. Now, I also had a duty period. So that was either cafeteria duty, hall duty, whatever the case may be, office duty. Then you have your lunch period, which I was not about to give up. I need to eat my lunch, okay? So that is my time. So now I had 2 periods technically to plan. One of them is considered your planning period, and one of them is considered your professional period. And your professional period is a period where it's listed on your schedule when they can schedule meetings. So even though you think that you have those 2 periods, you still were able to be booked for a meeting, whether it be an IEP meeting, a parent meeting, a 504 meeting, anything like that. In Florida, yes. So there are 7 periods in a day. How many periods am I teaching? 6. Wow, 6 50-minute periods. Holy moly. Yeah, that was a big adjustment for me. So the schedule that I have was very different. When I first looked at it, I was totally confused. But what they do in my county is there's only 2 lunch periods. So half of the school goes to lunch the first lunch period and half goes the second lunch period. Every single student has lunch for only 30 minutes in the day, including you. So I taught 6 periods. I was off 1 50-minute period for planning, and then I had a 1.5 hour block for lunch. So throughout my entire teaching day, I had an 80-minute break. So this is a big adjustment for me, as you can understand. But the good thing is, on Wednesdays, you got a little bit of a break, and I love Wednesdays. I'll tell you why. So in New York, all of those school districts have the same schedules every day, unless you're on a block scheduling, and then that might change. But here in Florida, in the county that I teach in, on Wednesdays, the kids get out of school an hour earlier. They come into school and they start at 7:20 and they end at 1:10. From this extra hour, 10 minutes that we were given, we are now supposed to meet up with our PLCs. What is a PLC? A PLC is a professional learning community. So during this time, during this hour that we have off, we are to meet with teachers that are teaching within the same grade or subject area as us. So I would meet with other 10th grade teachers, 10th grade English teachers, and we would plan together. So we had this time to collaborate and talk about what's working in our classroom, what's not, and we get to look at data. But our periods were shorter throughout the day. Students, we saw them for about 40 minutes a period. We still had that 30-minute lunch, but now we have time to meet as professionals and design lessons that are going to be effective for our students. So, teaching in Florida, in the district or in the county that I am teaching in, we do not have a scheduled duty period. That's something that us teachers, we have the benefit of not having, and we have that time and we use that time for planning. So that is definitely a plus for us. Another thing that is different between teaching in New York and teaching in Florida is the open campus in Florida. If you look outside, we have palm trees everywhere you look. So what I like about teaching in Florida is the campuses are open. Most of our hallways and most of the school has a common area that's outside. Yes, we get to breathe fresh air throughout the day. In New York, all of our schools are indoors, everything. We might have a small courtyard that kids can walk through, or an open space that's in the center of the school, but for the most part, all of the schools in New York, well, in New York City, definitely, but on Long Island are indoors. Something else that is different about teaching in Florida is we don't have the Common Core standards. I mean, we have the Common Core standards. They are very similar. They are basically the same, except for a few periods and commas here and there. So we just call them Florida State Standards, and we add our own little twist to it. I honestly don't see a difference, but we just call it something else. With our Florida State Standards, we have what's called CRMs. Dun dun dun. What are CRMs? CRMs are curriculum resource materials. What does that mean? That means Florida says, here you go, here are the lessons you are going to teach. Have fun. Now, I'm not sure if this is all of Florida, but in my county, they are giving us the lesson plans that we are suggested to use in our classrooms. Now, if you know anything about me, I don't like being told what to do. I was not a fan of this when I first started teaching. I said, I've been teaching for 10 years. I know what I'm doing. These standards are basically the Common Core standards. Let me teach what I want. So I did the CRMs for, I think it was 1 quarter, if I made it to 1 quarter. I'm sorry, I can't do this. I need to teach something else. My heart is not in it. So I need to teach what I want to teach in order to still implement the standards, but make it more fun and engaging for me as well as the students. Because if I am not having fun, guess what? The kids are not having fun either. By CRMs, I'm going to do my thing. And you have that freedom to do as well. I didn't think I did, but I was told I do. As long as I'm sticking to the standards, you're not going to make anyone angry. So that's what I did. But for some teachers that say, you know what, it makes it easier, I have less planning to do, I just print out the CRMs or I read them over, you can do that. You have that freedom. So that is entirely up to you. Also really great about the school that I'm teaching at in Florida is we are mostly digital. Every student has a laptop. Every teacher is issued a laptop. There are pros and cons to this, and honestly, with the pandemic and doing virtual learning, this was a smooth transition for most of our students. And I'm going to include a link here that talks about when schools will reopen after the pandemic. But if you want to check out that video, it talks about some CDC recommendations. Since Florida has their own set of standards, do they take Regents exams? The answer is no, we do not. We take what's called the FSA, Florida State Assessments. We have our own fancy schmancy assessments that are all done digitally. That is why the students use the laptops, and they are all done on there. And there are definite pros and cons to doing it that way as well. Just knowing what you know about technology, I'm sure you can figure out that it sometimes could be a disaster, but other times it could be something that is definitely beneficial. Let's talk about job security. Do we have unions in Florida? Yes, we do. Do we have unions in New York? Yes, we do. Do I want to bore you with the details? No, I do not. Just know that there are unions in both places, and there are people that are there to help you and protect your job. So, yay, unions. Awesome. We have tenure in Florida. That is a huge difference from New York because guess what? In New York, we used to have tenure after 3 years, so that's a little bit of job security. Here in Florida, there is no tenure. We got rid of that a while ago. So that is something that I was a little apprehensive about when I first started, but has kind of eased my nerves a little bit, and I'll tell you why. So since there's no pressure of getting tenure, there's no pressure of getting tenure. Do I still get observed? Yes. And I get observed a little bit more in the beginning. After a few years of being in this county, I won't need as many observations, but honestly, the observations are totally different here as well. In New York, on Long Island, I got observed many times throughout the year by different administrators for the entire 40-minute period or 42-minute period. Here in the district that I'm currently teaching in, we got observed a few times by the same administrator. I like this because they have seen you in multiple different lessons, so they can really give you honest feedback about what they're seeing in your classroom. Also, the observations are shorter, so they do not stay for the full period, which is great. I think I had 1 observation for the entire period out of the entire year. So, yeah. And also the observations are not unannounced. Let's get into what you all want to hear, and that's the salary. Show me the money. What's happening? Let's take a look. So I'm going to share with you old salary. This is what I guess, got grandfathered into, or I got hired under the old salary. So this is what I'm sticking to. And then I will show you the new salary. And again, this is all within my particular county. It does not reflect all of Florida. Is the average teacher pay around the same? Yes. So let's take a look. This is the biggest difference, for me anyway, from teaching in New York to teaching in Florida. I won't tell you how much exactly I am making, but I received a large pay cut coming from Long Island to teaching in Florida. And there are many factors that come into play regarding this, but I will say that the cost of living is lower here in Florida, and we don't have a state tax. And my health insurance is free through my school. Also in Florida, we get performance bonuses. So depending on how the students perform on their state assessments at the end of the year, we are eligible for bonuses. Now, the only negative of that is that, of course, that bonus does not go into our retirement plan. But it's nice to have a little bit of extra money that is going into your paycheck for the summer. I love co-teaching. I think it is super beneficial when it is done correctly. In Florida, again, in the county that I am in, and I don't know if this is the entire state of Florida, I can't speak to that, there are no co-teaching models here yet. I am still working on that. I want to be a co-teacher in Florida, so we'll see what happens. And also in New York, I was teaching most of my last school district that I was at. I was actually the self-contained teacher for the English classes 9, 10, 11, and 12. So I was teaching all of the students that had IEPs that were in the self-contained or special class model. I was teaching students that had disabilities, but they were not severe disabilities. They were still on a Regents track. So here in Florida, we don't have like the classroom that I would have had in New York. I wouldn't have had that here in Florida. They would integrate those students into a general education setting. So they do have classes for the more severely disabled students in my school and in my county, but those students are not on they're not like getting a Regents diploma. They're on a different track. So that's the difference here too, is I think special education wise, there is a huge gap. And I'm not sure that Florida is doing everything they need to do in order to help those kids that have special needs. And that is what I'm going to say about that. As a special education teacher, at my core, I feel that I have a leg up in teaching in my classroom because I know those strategies, I've implemented them. But again, it would be nice to have that extra teacher to kind of work with and help to meet the needs of the students. So are there definite pros and cons to teaching in Florida and teaching in New York? 100%. I still have yet to figure out which I liked better, but again, I am so lucky and blessed to have a job, and I love, love, love teaching. So that's it. Thank you for watching. I really appreciate you taking the time out to see the difference between teaching on Long Island and teaching here in Florida. I'm going to leave some links down below in case you need any additional information. Those are there. And again, this is just a reflection of my experience in both Florida and New York. So please understand that this is not a blanket statement for every single district or every single county. This is just my my personal experience. But thank you so much for watching. And again, if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel. If you found this video to be helpful and you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you soon.